Welcome back to the deep dive. You know how this works. We take the most complex source material you send our way, and we tried to distill it into its essential insights. And today, we are really getting into the nature of power itself, specifically this paradox of arrival.
It's a fascinating topic.
It is. We've been analyzing a body of work that we've distilled into a source we're calling the Hollow Succession, and it presents this really radical view of what global leadership is.
Mm-hmm.
It suggests that getting to the top, the CEO's office, the prime minister's cabinet, whatever it is, that doesn't necessarily unlock real agency.
In fact, it often does the opposite. It locks you in.
It locks you into continuity. Okay, let's unpack this premise, because we're not talking about leadership failure in the traditional sense.
No, not at all. We're looking at the failure of systems to reward anything other than their own survival. The mission for this deep dive is really to ask, what happens after the struggle is supposedly over?
Right. What happens when the person who fought so hard to conquer the system finally gets there, only to realize they now have to serve it?
Exactly. We train leaders to win the game, but by the time they've mastered all the rules, they're fundamentally unprepared to actually change the game itself. It all comes down to what happens after you get the keys to the kingdom.
So the sources start by defining the kind of person who even survives this journey. They call this archetype the warrior.
Sure. Tell us about the training. What kind of curriculum is this?
Well, the training is, it's ruthlessly functional. It's not about big ideas or, harmony or service. It's explicitly for one thing: control.
Control over what?
Control over processes, control over the narrative, and maybe most importantly, control over yourself. The core logic, and you see this across corporations, governments, even big NGOs, is that the system rewards one thing above all else:
Endurance.
sheer endurance. The person who lasts the longest, who adapts the most seamlessly, they're the one who eventually gets let in. So the warrior isn't trained to be a visionary. They're trained to be a master technician of the existing machine.
That's a perfect way to put it. They become expert navigators. Their toolkit has a few core skills. First, power becomes their compass. They can read the institutional winds flawlessly. Second, efficiency is... it's like the highest virtue.
And the third.
And this one is critical. Silence. Silence becomes their primary survival skill.
Okay, let's pause on silence, because that feels really counterintuitive. We usually think of leaders as having a powerful, loud voice. How is silence a survival tool?
It's the art of strategic non-disruption. It means you learn when to stop asking the really hard foundational questions.
The inconvenient one.
The very inconvenient ones, the ones that might slow things down or, challenge the basic legitimacy of the structure you're trying to climb. You learn the language of the court so perfectly that you never say anything that suggests the court itself is flawed.
You learn to speak in terms of quarterly results, not existential threats.
Precisely. And all of this is done with the belief, the deeply ingrained belief, that mastering the system will eventually open its doors. That arrival, the promotion, the appointment will finally grant you the agency you've been craving.
But here's where it gets really interesting for me. If the system is trying to survive, why wouldn't it want genuine visionaries? Why prioritize function over real transformation? What's the fear?
The fear is collapse. The system equates true, radical risk-taking with instability. Its own existence is paramount. Which brings us to the climax of the warrior's journey.
The moment they stand before the king, the symbol of all that established power.
Right. And the myth we're usually sold, the whole meritocracy story, is that this has to be a fight, a disruptive act where the new guard topples the old.
But that's not what happens here. The sources describe a profound surprise.
A huge surprise. The warrior. They can't kill the king. And it's not from a lack of strength or skill.
So why not?
It's because the only power they've ever cultivated is the power that functions within that system. They've become a mirror of the very thing they sought to replace. They lack the one thing the system truly fears.
Fundamental transformation.
Exactly. And the king's reaction is what makes this so chilling. He doesn't fight back. He doesn't argue.
No, he just seems tired.
He shows this deep, profound fatigue, the exhaustion of maintaining structures that, no longer really serve life or dignity or the future. And so he just willingly removes the crown and places it in the warrior's hands.
And this is the moment that gets celebrated globally, right? The cameras are flashing, the headlines read, "Barrier broken, new voice at the table."
Yes, everyone celebrates. But the text warns us.
Hmm.
This is the single most dangerous moment in leadership.
Why dangerous? It looks like success.
Because it invites complacency disguised as success. The warrior, after all that struggle, now holds the physical symbol of power. They believe the fight is over.
They think their arrival is the change.
They think the celebration of their success means the system has reformed itself, and their focus immediately shifts from changing the kingdom to defending the throne.
But then, the king isn't done. He opens a chest. And this is the part of the story that just shatters the whole illusion.
This is the core revelation. The king opens a chest, and inside are many, many identical replaceable crowns.
Wow. Let's really unpack that image. What does that revelation of identical crowns really teach us about power?
It teaches us a few brutal truths. The first is about interchangeability. The role was never about you. The system doesn't need this specific warrior, it just needs a warrior. You are replaceable.
The second truth
Is about systemic stability. The purpose of the crown isn't to build a better future, it's to make sure the foundation never ever changes. It was never a promise of agency, it was just a mechanism for continuity.
So when we see these systems corporations, governments bringing in new faces, diverse faces, it's not necessarily to reshape the rules.
Often it's just to demonstrate that the structure can look inclusive without changing its core logic.
Inclusion doesn't automatically equal influence.
Not at all. And that's the third insight. The illusion of influence. You're highly visible, you're celebrated, but your actual power is confined to these pre-approved channels. Your job is to steer the ship, not to chart a new course.
And this just circles right back to the warriors' training.
It does.
They were chosen because they endured, because they learned the language, because they survived without rocking the boat.
Yeah.
Their strength is real, they're brilliant, they're resilient, but it's a resilience that was shaped to reward performance, not reflection.
And that's the paradox. The leaders succeeded precisely where they should have hesitated. We train people to be incredibly competent, to absorb endless pressure.
But we don't train them to be reflective or to be ethical challengers.
We reward their ability to function, and we quietly punish anyone who questions the legitimacy of the function itself.
It's a pretty cynical view of success.
Yeah.
And when you look at the challenges we face today, planetary crises, social fragmentation, deep inequality, this kind of leadership, the kind built only on continuity, it's just not enough.
It's fundamentally inadequate. The person wearing the crown is trapped by the design of the throne.
So what does this all mean then? If getting to the top is basically a trap, what does true global leadership even look like, according to this framework?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the real work, the truly transformative work, it doesn't start when you take the crown.
No.
No. The threshold for genuine change begins with having the courage to stand in front of that open chest, the one full of identical crowns, and to name what it represents, to say it out loud.
To name it as a system that replaces people instead of renewing ideas.
Exactly. A system that stabilizes inertia instead of healing wounds. And critically, one that confuses continuity with justice.
That kind of leadership would require something much deeper than ambition.
It requires what the sources call ethical imagination, the ability to truly conceive of a structure that doesn't exist yet. It demands cultural humility, knowing the system you mastered isn't the only one.
And it would mean you have to be willing to risk the one thing you fought your whole life for, belonging.
That's the hardest part. Risking belonging for the sake of integrity. It means you might have to use the platform you earned to argue for changes that might actually shorten your own time on that platform.
You have to be willing to reject the reward you spent decades chasing.
You might have to. The most profound use of power might not be signing a new policy, but sacrificing your own advancement to fundamentally change how power itself flows through the system.
And the most radical act proposed in the source is just that. Sometimes the most powerful thing to do is not to sit on the throne, but to actually step away from it.
To walk away, and instead join the work of building something entirely new from the ground up.
It forces you to ask a really big question across all cultures and histories.
Has the age of crowns reached its end? It's really about recognizing these systemic traps of arrival, whether it's in your own career or the institutions you see around you.
The future of global leadership, then, might not be found in who wears the next identical crown, but in whether we finally have the courage to dismantle the chest itself and build a world that no longer needs one. Thank you for joining us for this pretty intense deep dive. We encourage you to reflect on this idea, the nature of power, of continuity, and that illusion of arrival in the world you see around you.